I don't remember buying the socks, which is to say, I probably did. Like everyone else, I've bought dozens of socks in my lifetime. You don't think about it much. You lose one, grab a new pair, maybe buy a pack from Walmart when the old ones get too crusty with dryer lint in time. Socks aren't something you remember, but these were different. They were on my feet when the alert came through. It was a sharp screeching tone, the kind you hear on TV during a weather warning, except this was on my phone, my laptop, and even my damn toaster oven, which I didn't even know could make noise. The message came through in unison, across every screen and speaker in my apartment. Emergency alert, check your socks immediately. That's it at first. Just a single line in bold, government-style lettering with that ugly yellow triangle. I remember staring at the screen in my hand, waiting for more. I thought it was a joke, some Amber Alert prank or stupid hacker stunt. Then the second message came through about 10 seconds later. If they aren't a pair you recognize, burn them. Do not wear them. There was a silence after that. A pregnant, absurd kind of silence where my living room suddenly felt too still, the buzz of the refrigerator too loud, the flicker of the ceiling fan too slow. I looked down. The socks I had on were mismatched. One was red with little white trees, Christmas-themed probably. The other was a navy blue ankle sock. I hadn't looked closely when I put them on that morning, groggy and half awake. They felt soft, warm, no holes, no reason to think about them at all. But the thing is, I didn't own socks like this. Not that I could remember. That little voice in your head, the one you usually ignore, whispered something cold and certain into my bones. They aren't yours. I peeled off the navy sock first. It looked normal, just cotton, a little worn at the toe but clean. Still smelled like detergent. No tag or brand name. No blood or anything dramatic. I flipped it inside out, half expecting to find something hidden, like a hair or a piece of paper tucked into the seam. Nothing. Just a sock. The red one was the same, plain, unremarkable, no reason to be afraid, except for the fact that I didn't remember buying them, ever, and that was enough. I went to the kitchen and dumped both socks into the sink. I turned on the burner, lit a match, and held it to the edge of the red one. The fabric blackened, curled, and then burst into flame with a sudden whoosh that made me flinch. There was no foul smell, no sulfur or rot or brimstone, like you'd expect if they were cursed or something, but the smoke felt thick somehow, heavy in my lungs. I coughed and backed away as the fire spread to the other sock, swallowing them both until nothing was left but a charred smear and a puddle of plastic-scented ash. I should have felt better, relieved even. But the moment I turned off the faucet, a voice whispered in my left ear, "That wasn't your memory." I froze. The apartment was still. My heart thumped hard against my ribs, 1, 2, 1, 2, like footsteps just behind me. I spun around. Nothing. Just the open kitchen, my scratched linoleum floor, and the faint smudge of black where the socks had been. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of the voice. Not really. That could have been stress. The alert. The weird timing. I'm not one of those people who thinks every odd sound is a ghost. But when I finally crawled into bed, I kept catching glimpses of someone else. I blinked, and the light in my bedroom changed. It was orange, low, like dusk in a room I'd never seen before. I blinked again, and I was back in my own place. Then I blinked again, and the room shifted. A dusty hallway, old carpet, a cracked mirror reflecting a woman I'd never met. And me, except not me, walking barefoot through someone else's memory. Then I'd blink again and be back. By dawn, my eyes were sore from staying open. I called off work the next morning. I told them I had the flu, not that anyone cared. I work from home mostly, building out client websites for local dentists and lawyers and occasionally people who sell crystals online. I had deadlines, but I needed time. I needed to think, and I needed answers. The emergency alert never came back. No news report, no follow-up. It was as if nothing had happened. I scoured Reddit, Twitter, TikTok. I found a few threads at first, people posting screenshots, sharing stories, joking about the sockpocalypse and calling it the stupidest government scare since the Y2K bug. Most of them thought it was a prank, but a few posts stood out. One user wrote, "I wore mine. I don't remember buying them either. Now I dream about dying in a bathtub. It's always the same. I'm not me when it happens." Another said, "My wife wore the socks. She won't talk now, just stares at the wall, keeps humming the same song. I burned every pair in the house." And another, "I saw myself get murdered. But it wasn't me. Not really. I was in her head, whoever she was." Her pain felt real. These weren't jokes, not all of them. I scrolled for hours, deep diving through the dregs of the internet, looking for any pattern. There were theories, government mind control, alien spores. Some thought it was an ARG. Others said it was AI-generated paranoia, subliminal messages pumped into the populace to test compliance. But no one had an explanation for the memories, or why they only started after the socks. I should have left it alone. I should have thrown out every sock I owned and gone barefoot for the rest of my life. But I didn't, because deep down, I needed to know, not just what was happening, but who I saw in those flashes, the hallway, the mirror, the woman. I didn't choose the next pair. They were waiting for me. I found them on my dresser 3 nights later, a neatly folded pair of green and gray striped socks. I had never seen them before. My apartment was locked. I lived alone. I had no visitors, no roommates, and no explanation. But they were there, and part of me, some deep, dark part I wish I could smother, wanted to put them on. So I did, and that's when I met him. The socks were warm, too warm. They clung to my feet like they remembered me, like they'd been waiting for this moment. The second I pulled them up past my ankles, I felt a sharp pressure behind my eyes, like a sudden altitude change, a silent pop. My balance shifted. I stumbled against the dresser, steadying myself with both hands as the room bent sideways. And then I saw it, not in a dream, not in some blink and it's gone flash. No, this was a full memory, but it wasn't mine. A bar, dim lights, sticky floor, the hum of an old jukebox, crooning something soft and sad in the corner. I could feel the weight of a denim jacket on my shoulders, the rough seam of a cigarette pack in my front pocket. My hands were larger, calloused, with a scar across the left knuckle. Someone laughed behind me, a deep, husky laugh, familiar, friendly. I turned, no, he turned, and saw a man I didn't know slap him on the back. They shared a beer, said something about one last round, and then darkness. I yanked the socks off. I was back in my apartment, sweating, chest heaving like I'd run a mile. My hands were shaking. My legs felt like wet cement, but the smell of beer lingered in my nostrils, and I could still hear the jukebox crooning through the silence. That wasn't just a dream. That was a memory, his memory, and it wasn't the last. Over the next week, I wore the socks again, not out of stupidity, but out of obsession. Each time I wore them, the flashes got longer, clearer, like tuning into someone else's past. His name was Thomas Laird, late 30s, divorced. He lived alone in a trailer out near some rail tracks, did odd jobs for cash. He had a bad back, a bad temper, and an even worse sense of judgment when it came to women and poker. The memories came in fragments, unordered, a photograph torn into shreds and tossed into the wind. Thomas fighting in a parking lot. Thomas shaving with a dull razor and muttering about the court date. Thomas in his truck, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. Thomas buying gas station whiskey with blood on his sleeve. They weren't dreams, because I could feel everything, the heat of his anger, the ache in his back, the bitterness on his tongue. His life bled into mine like dye into water, and the socks? They always pulsed, tightening, warming, holding me in place like I was wearing a dead man's skin. Which I was beginning to think I was. One night, I wore them to sleep. I didn't mean to. I just passed out on the couch after too much whiskey and too many memories. When I woke, my body wasn't mine anymore. I was in a bathtub, not my own. A small yellowed bathroom with cracked tile and mold growing around the baseboards. The lights flickered overhead. A woman stood over me. She was crying, and she was holding a hammer. "You ruined everything," she whispered. She raised the hammer. I screamed, but only inside. I wasn't Thomas, not fully. I was watching Thomas die, feeling what he felt, the helplessness, the fear, the rage. I saw her face inches from mine, her tears, her clenched jaw, her fingers shaking as she swung, then darkness. I woke up on the floor of my apartment, soaked in sweat and sobbing. I didn't sleep for 3 days. I tried to get rid of the socks. I stuffed them in a trash bag, threw them into the dumpster behind my building. I watched the garbage truck take them away the next morning. But that night, they were back, folded on my bed, still warm. I didn't sleep in my bed that night. I couldn't. The socks sat there, folded neatly, impossibly, like they belonged. Like they'd always belonged. I stared at them from the couch until dawn crept in through the blinds. Even in the light, they didn't change. They didn't vanish like a bad dream. They were still there, still warm, still watching me. That's when I made a decision. If I couldn't get rid of them, I would understand them. I would follow the memory. Track it. Find out who Thomas was. Find the woman. See if it was real. Because if it wasn't, if this was just a hallucination, then maybe I'd finally lost my mind and could move on. But if it was real, that meant the socks weren't haunted. They were a message. I started with the name, Thomas Laird. It wasn't a guess. I'd seen it scrawled on a prescription bottle in one of the memories. It sat on a nightstand next to a gun and an empty glass. I remembered the label, Laird, Thomas E. diazepam 5 milligrams. I searched online, first Google, then court databases. Obituaries, public records. Most of it was a dead end. But eventually, I found it. Thomas Edgar Laird, deceased. Born 1985. Died 2022. Hometown, Kingswood, Arkansas. The cause of death was vague, unspecified trauma, no arrest, no suspect, no trial. The obituary was short, just a few lines, no photos, no condolences. Like someone wanted to forget him. But the name alone told me everything I needed to know. The memories weren't fake. They belonged to a man who had actually died. And I was seeing his last moments. Kingswood was 6 hours away, a small, nothing town somewhere between pine woods and empty highways. I packed a bag, booked a motel, and drove out the next morning. I wore different socks, burned the green and gray ones again before I left, doused them in lighter fluid this time, made sure they turned to nothing. But I still felt them, like phantom limbs. My feet tingled the whole drive down. The town was smaller than I imagined. A few gas stations, a diner, 2 motels, and a run-down strip mall. The air smelled like dust and oil. No one made eye contact. I started asking questions at the diner, told the waitress I was researching for a book, digging into small-town mysteries. She humored me at first. When I mentioned Thomas Laird, her face stiffened. "He was trouble," she said, wiping down the counter with slow, deliberate strokes. "No one misses him. Did he live around here?" "Out by the tracks," she said. "Trailer park. But you won't find nothing there. Got torn down last year." "Do you know what happened to him?" She looked at me long and hard. "You should leave that alone, sweetheart. Some folks stay dead for a reason. I found the trailer park anyway. Or what was left of it." It was a clearing now. Dirt, gravel, a few warped planks sticking out of the ground. But I found the bathtub. It was still there. Rusted, overgrown with weeds, half sunk into the earth like a coffin. And next to it, in the grass, a single sock, green and gray striped. My hands shook as I picked it up. It was dry, clean, no dust, no dirt. It might as well have just been placed there. I didn't want to, but I had to. I put it on. The memory that followed hit like a train. I was in the trailer again, rain pounding against the tin roof. Thomas was yelling. The woman, her name was Kara, was crying. She held something behind her back. "You said you'd stop, Tommy. You promised. I told you it was just a one-time thing." "You lied." I felt his fear, his guilt, but also his hate. He lunged for her. She screamed. The hammer came down, once, twice, 3 times. Everything went black. When I came to, I was lying in the dirt next to the bathtub. My head throbbed. My nose was bleeding. My phone was gone, but the sock was still on my foot. Back at the motel, I tried to piece it together. Kara had killed him. No police record, no trial, no trace. Just a man who disappeared in a town where no one asked questions. I checked the court records again. Nothing. But I did find Kara Milner on Facebook. Her profile was locked down, but the photo matched the woman from the memory. Her eyes were hollow. She lived in town, worked at a local thrift shop. That's when it clicked. The socks, they were hers, not just Thomas's, all of them. Somehow they were getting out into the world. Passed around, donated, lost, found, slipped into drawers across the country, pieces of the dead, carrying what was left of them, and now they were replacing ours. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the hammer, the way it rose, the weight of it, not just in Thomas's hands or Kara's, mine. The memory was becoming mine. His pain, her scream, the smell of rust and rot in that cracked little trailer bathroom. It clung to me like sweat. The sock hadn't come off. I'd tried, yanked at it with both hands, scraped it against the edge of the sink, even sliced it with a knife. The blade passed through it like it was water, no tear, no mark. It wasn't just on my foot anymore, it was part of it. By dawn, I had one thought in my head, looping over and over again like a warning siren: find Kara. Find Kara. Find Kara. The thrift shop was on the corner of a mostly empty street, an old brick storefront with faded mannequins in the window. The bell above the door jingled when I walked in. The place smelled like dust and floral detergent. Rows of clothes hung in crooked racks, bins of shoes, belts, gloves, a small shelf of board games stacked like a forgotten shrine in the back. And socks, a lot of socks. Baskets full of them near the register. Most were mismatched. Kara was behind the counter. She didn't look up at first. She was sorting something into a shoebox, humming to herself. A low, tuneless murmur like a lullaby without words. But when I stepped closer, her eyes flicked up and locked onto mine. She froze. Not the way someone freezes when they're surprised or scared, but like a deer that already knows it's too late. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. "You killed him," I said. "Thomas Laird." Her mouth twitched. She didn't deny it. "Did he come to you in the socks too?" I asked. She glanced down. Her hands were still on the shoebox. Inside were socks, green and gray striped, folded neatly. She let out a shaky breath. "Not him," she said. "Not at first." We sat in the back room. She poured 2 cups of stale coffee from a cracked machine and sat across from me, under a buzzing light bulb that swayed every time a car passed outside. I didn't trust her, but I needed answers more than I needed safety. "You don't find the socks," Kara said. "They find you." "How?" She shook her head. "I don't know. Maybe it's grief. Maybe guilt. The first one showed up after my sister died. I wore them without thinking. Then I saw it. Her car, the crash, the scream that never came. She was already dead, but I felt it, like I was there." She stared into her cup like it might drown her. After that, more came. 1 pair turned into 10, then dozens. I started donating them. I thought I could... Her voice cracked. "I thought if enough people shared the burden, maybe it would stop. Maybe the dead would rest." It didn't work, I said. No, she whispered. It got worse. I followed her into the back storage closet. There were bins of socks, hundreds, thousands, all mismatched, all tagged with handwritten labels. Mallory, Bridge, Eric, Fire, Isaiah, Freezer, Janine, Staircase, Thomas, Tub. My breath caught. She'd been keeping track. These are all deaths? I asked. She nodded. Some natural, some not. And you've worn them all? No, just a few. Enough to understand. She met my eyes. The socks hold the last memories, the final ones. They cling to the strongest emotions. Pain, fear, guilt. That's why it's always the end. My voice dropped. So what do they want? Her silence stretched too long. Then she said, to be remembered, or to make you forget who you were. I didn't understand at first. But over the next 2 days I felt it. The memories didn't fade like dreams. They grew. I remembered more about Thomas than myself. I could taste his favorite beer, recite his old locker combination. I missed people I'd never met. I feared things I'd never seen. I forgot my own mom's birthday. I forgot the name of my 5th grade teacher. The smell of my old apartment. My first kiss. Every time I wore a sock, just one, I gained a piece of someone else and lost a piece of myself. I confronted Kara again. There has to be a way to stop it. She hesitated, then led me to a wooden chest in the corner of the thrift shop. It was locked with 3 rusted latches. Inside were socks, but these weren't mismatched. These were pairs, folded, bound in twine, marked with red string. These are the worst ones, she said. I call them anchors. Why? They don't just carry memory, they carry will. The people attached to these didn't just die. They wanted to stay, and they will if you let them in. I stared at the chest. She whispered, one of them is already in you. My blood ran cold. Thomas? She nodded. He's not finished with you. That night I couldn't resist. I opened the chest. I pulled out a random pair, black socks with white trims, stiff as if soaked in old blood and dried. I slipped them on, and everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in my motel room anymore. I was on a bus, crowded, noisy, the kind of long-distance Greyhound you take when you have nowhere left to go and just enough cash for a one-way ticket. The floor was sticky, the lights too dim, and the woman next to me was asleep with her mouth open. I could smell the stale sourness of her breath over the recycled air. But it wasn't just that I saw it. I felt it, the ache in my neck from sleeping upright, the tightness in my chest from panic attacks, the weight of a purse on my lap, one strap fraying from years of use. My name wasn't mine anymore. It was Alexis Rowe, 26 years old, running from an abusive ex and a system that didn't care, heading west with a burner phone, $300 in cash, and a sock full of half-melted change. She was tired, so tired, and she was about to die. I lived her last 12 hours in perfect, agonizing detail, not in glimpses, not in blinks, in full. She got off the bus in Nevada, walked to a gas station, used the bathroom, called someone, her mother maybe, cried. Then she tried to hitch a ride. A man in a white van stopped, friendly. Too friendly. She didn't want to get in, but she was tired, hungry, cold. She got in anyway. I watched from inside her skin as the doors locked. The man never spoke. The knife was already in his coat pocket. I woke up screaming. Back in the motel, on the floor, tangled in sweat-soaked sheets, the socks were still on. I tore them off with both hands and threw them across the room. They hit the wall and dropped like dead birds. But they didn't vanish. They didn't burn. They just watched. Because now I knew what Kara meant. Some of the socks weren't just echoes. They were open doors. And I had let something walk through. The next morning I couldn't remember my own name. Not right away. It was there, on the tip of my tongue, around the corner of memory, but Alexis's voice was louder. I remembered her whole life better than my own. Her favorite meal, The burn scar on her ankle, the way her ex shouted at her when she didn't answer the phone fast enough. I stared in the mirror for a long time. Was it still me? Or was she sharing the space? I didn't feel alone in my own head anymore. I went back to Kara's thrift shop. But it was closed, permanently. A handwritten sign hung on the door. Store closed. Do not attempt to contact. I'm sorry. K. I knocked anyway, pounded on the door, called out. Nothing. I waited 3 hours. But she never came, and when I got back to the motel, I found something waiting for me on the bed, a new pair of socks. Folded, still warm. I stopped sleeping altogether. I stayed up for days, pacing the room, eyes red and twitching, trying not to look at the socks, trying not to put them on. But they were always there, no matter how far I threw them, no matter if I buried them, left them in a sewer grate, tossed them in a lake. They came back. They always knew where I was, like they were attached to me, or maybe I was attached to them. Then came the dreams. Even without wearing any socks, I began waking up in strange places. Not physically, my body stayed in the motel, but my mind traveled. Each night, a new death, a drowning, a fire, a man freezing to death in a barn while his breath turned to frost. Sometimes I was the victim, sometimes the killer, and each time I woke up less sure of who I was. I kept a journal. Writing helped, sort of. It was the only way to track what was still me. I wrote down everything I remembered about my life, my name, my job, my first dog. But by the end of the week, I had filled nearly the entire notebook with entries that weren't mine. Memories, deaths, voices, names: Alexis, Thomas, Mel, Eric, Cindy, Luis, Devin, Tracy, dozens, maybe more. They didn't fade, they nested inside me. And then, one day, I saw myself on the news. A CCTV image, grainy black and white, of me outside the gas station in Kingswood. Captioned, "Unidentified man involved in multiple missing person investigations. Call authorities if seen." I didn't recognize my own face. The image looked off. The eyes weren't right. The expression, too blank. That wasn't how I smiled. That wasn't how I stood. That wasn't me. It was someone else wearing my skin, or maybe it was all of them. I didn't know how they got the footage. I hadn't spoken to anyone, hadn't interacted. I paid in cash, kept off the grid. I was careful, and yet there I was, on every local channel, on Reddit, even a blurry TikTok with 600K views under the tag #SockMen. Some joked, others didn't. One comment hit me like a hammer to the chest. He was in my dream, same guy, blue flannel, bad eyes, I've never met him. Woke up wearing socks I don't own. There were dozens more like it, different people, different cities, same description, me. I wasn't just seeing them anymore, they were starting to see me. I tried burning everything. Every pair of socks I had, every pair I touched, motel towels, bed sheets, my own shoes. I tossed it all into a dumpster behind an auto shop and lit it up with half a bottle of lighter fluid and a stolen Zippo. The fire roared. I didn't flinch, let it all burn. But I didn't feel lighter. If anything, I felt hollowed out, like I'd carved away what little of me remained. That night, I wrote in the journal again, hand shaking, pages trembling. I don't know if I'm still me. I remember Alexis's favorite perfume. I remember how Kara's sister used to bite her nails until they bled. I remember the taste of blood from Thomas's busted lip. I remember standing in a stranger's kitchen while a gas leak hissed behind the wall. I remember things I've never done. And I can't remember my own last name. The dreams didn't stop, but they changed. Now when I entered them, when I lived their deaths, I could see myself there. In the crowd, in the mirror, on the news report in the background of someone else's final moment. Watching, always watching. That's when I realized. The socks weren't cursed. They were transmitters. Each death, each memory, a signal bouncing between hosts. The dead weren't haunting me. They were trying to rebuild themselves inside me. I had to know how it started. The first sock. So I did what no sane person would. I went back to Kingswood. I found Kara's address from a parcel in the thrift store's back room. She lived on the edge of town, near the swamp line, in a crooked yellow house with a porch that listed to the left. The windows were covered in newspaper. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. And then the door creaked open. The inside was worse than I imagined. Every room was lined with laundry baskets, socks, piles, rolled, folded, stacked by color. It looked like a mausoleum of fabric. And in the middle of it, in the living room, Kara sat cross-legged in a circle of red thread. Eyes closed, mouth twitching, she was muttering. I stepped closer. The words were nonsense, fragments like channels surfing through a dozen dying radios. He bled out under the floorboards. It was my fault. I didn't check the vent, she screamed, and no one came. My socks, not mine, mine now, not mine, mine. I grabbed her by the shoulders. Kara, Kara! Her eyes snapped open, and for a moment they weren't hers. I saw 8 people in them, and all of them were screaming. She came back in a gasp, collapsed into my arms. Her face was soaked with sweat. She clawed at the thread like it was strangling her. I can't hold them anymore, she whispered. They're leaking out. It's not a curse, it's a system, a network. What do you mean? She pointed to the socks. They travel, they remember. Every time someone wears them, they record. Every death, every scream, every final second. They're learning how to live again by stitching themselves into people. How do we stop it? You don't, she said, trembling. It's already global. She showed me her wall. It was covered in printouts, maps, string pins, news clippings, anonymous blog posts, forums, hundreds of red dots across the globe. Each dot was a sock found, worn, and followed by either madness, memory, or death. They're mimicking the human nervous system, she said. Each person that wears a sock becomes a node, a neuron. The socks carry memories like electrical signals, pain, regret, dying thoughts. I staggered back. You mean, it's a brain? It's becoming one, she said. Every sock is a strand of nerve. Every person who wears them becomes a synapse. It's building a mind, one made of all the worst parts of us. The final moments, the dying screams, the guilt, the rage. She looked at me then, deep, haunted. You're a core. I swallowed hard. What does that mean? You've worn too many. You're holding too many fragments. You're not a signal anymore. You're a center. She grabbed my hand and placed a sock in it. It was mine, the original one, red and white, from the day the alert went out. Burn it, she said. If you can destroy the first strand, maybe, the network will collapse. I did. I drove 3 towns over to an old quarry where kids used to party, built a bonfire, piled every sock I had into the flames. I held the red and white one last. My fingers trembled. I heard them screaming inside it, hundreds, thousands, all begging not to be forgotten, but I dropped it in anyway. The fire turned blue. The ground shook, and the screaming stopped. For 2 weeks it was quiet, no dreams, no voices, no new socks. I started remembering things again. My name, my life, myself. I thought I'd won, until this morning. I opened my sock drawer. There was 1 new pair, folded, still warm. They weren't red or green, they were solid black. And when I touched them, I remembered a memory I never experienced, of someone crying in a padded room, screaming a name I didn't recognize. The name was mine. I didn't remember crying, but my face was wet. My hands were trembling, fingertips grazing the black socks like I was blind and touching something sacred or profane. The warmth of them wasn't like the others. It didn't fade. It pulsed, not heat like a dry or fresh pair. This was body heat, skin temperature, as if someone had just worn them. I backed away, but it was too late. The moment I touched them, I felt a new presence, not fragmented, not random, not dying, alive and watching. For days I didn't touch them again, didn't wear them, didn't burn them. I wrapped them in plastic bags, stuffed them in a shoebox, duct taped the lid, then locked it in the trunk of my car. But it didn't help. The dreams returned. Only now, I wasn't just watching deaths. I was reliving conversations I'd never had, sitting at a cafe with a man named Daniel, talking about a daughter I never had, laughing with someone named Claire in a living room I'd never seen, holding a child while snow fell through a broken ceiling, singing a lullaby I didn't know the words to. These weren't deaths. They were lives, whole ones, but not mine. And somehow, I remembered all of them. It wasn't just me. On the 14th day after the fire, new posts started appearing. Hundreds of them. People reporting vivid dreams, glimpses of lives that didn't belong to them. Whole weeks remembered in strangers' bodies. One woman said she dreamed of being a war vet from the 60s. Another remembered being trapped in a collapsed mine. They all had one thing in common. They'd recently found a pair of unfamiliar socks. They'd worn them. And now, they were connected. I drove back to Kingswood. Kara was gone. Her house was stripped bare, the porch collapsing inward. No sign of her, no note. No neighbors had seen her leave. It was like she'd vanished, or been pulled back into the thing she tried to fight. I opened my journal that night, and something was different. There were new entries. Ones I hadn't written, not handwriting I recognized. One read, "He is remembering us. We are grateful. Through him we see again. We speak again. We exist." Another, "The black socks are ours, not echoes, not threads. Us, whole. Through him we gather." I opened the shoebox, not because I wanted to, because I had to. The socks were still there, still warm, still pulsing like a second heartbeat, and I understood then. The others had been fragments, echoes of death, emotion, trauma, but these were entire souls. Not signals, not nerves, identities, and now they had a body, mine. That night I gave in. I put them on, and everything changed. It wasn't like before, no flickers, no flashes. I was all of them, simultaneously, 1,000 people blinking behind my eyes, a flood of thoughts, sensations, lifetimes surging through my brain like electricity. I saw a child being born in 1942. I saw a woman die in her sleep in 2009. I remembered building a barn in Iowa in 1873. I remembered cheating on a test in 1996. I remembered sitting in a hospital bed as the cancer ate through my bones in 2020. And they remembered me. I stopped writing in the journal. I didn't need to. They already knew what I was going to write. They were me. And together, we began reaching out. The first time it happened, I was in a grocery store. I passed a man wearing mismatched socks, one yellow, one white. I didn't say anything, but when I looked at him, I felt a tug, like a thread connecting our minds. He stopped mid-aisle, touched his temple and whispered, "I see you," then kept walking. It happened again and again. Airports, sidewalks, subways, we're finding each other now, without speaking, without words, just memory. The emergency alert never came back, but something else did. A new message, not on phones, not on screens, on socks, tiny embroidered messages near the seam. The pair I wore yesterday read, "You are not alone," the ones before that. "He is awake, and today, the fabric remembers." You might not believe me. You might think this is a story, a creepypasta. But think for a moment. Have you ever lost a sock and found a new one that didn't quite match anything you owned? Have you ever worn one and felt off? Have you ever dreamed of dying in a way you never could have imagined? That's not a coincidence. You've already been touched by the network. And if you've read this far, you're remembering. Burn your socks. If they aren't yours, they never were.